Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. And we know that others might chime in. Plus, we're recording this so we can post it later. So Tracy and we've got Lauren on here as well. I think Caitlin from the Impact Group is joining us. So welcome. Good morning. Happy Cinco de Mayo. And we're going to talk about branding today. Really, we're going to talk about what is a brand, and why is a brand important for any organization, and what are some things that we can do to promote a brand, and what are some things we can do to protect the brand. And fortunately, we have our resident brand expert with us, the co-founder of the Impact Group, Tom Speaks. Tom, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks. Tom Speaks. I started the Impact Group with Don Poliak about 22 years ago. We are a firm that specializes in working with school districts, boards of development disabilities, cities. We specialize in getting entities' message out and really connecting with the community. And a brand is a big piece of that. So I'm excited about talking about that today.
And I'm Phil Herman. I'm a partner at the Impact Group. I joined the Impact Group about 15 months ago. I've known Tom and Don for about 15 or 16 years, and really was a client of the Impact Group at one point when I was at Hudson City Schools as superintendent. My entire career has been in public education up until joining the Impact Group, and where I'm able to serve school districts and boards of developmental disabilities and cities and villages in a new way. And so Tom, let's get started. First of all, let's just begin with, what is a brand? What's a brand?
Let's talk this through. And we've got you for another 27 minutes here. So we want to make sure this is a really impactful, what is a brand? A brand, we're so surrounded by brands, we almost don't notice them. A brand is an image. It's something that connects an entity with the larger public. When we think about brands, we think about McDonald's or Target's or BP or a college logo or whatever. What we have to think about is a brand, it's an experience, right? A brand is, when we see a brand, Disney or something else, we think about the experience we had with that entity. And here's the thing, is that whether we know it or not, there's an immediate connection. So when you see one of those brands, there's an immediate connection. Is it positive? Is it negative? Whatever. And if we're talking about a school district, a board of developmental disability, a city or whatever, we have to understand that when someone engages with our logo, they have an immediate reaction. Is it positive? Is it, there's great customer service there? Boy, they really care for the kids. Amazing people work there. Or is the brand experience, it's the runaround. People are rude. People are inconsistent. They don't do a good job. I don't know, but I do know that the people of your community have a very clear idea of what your brand is. And we're going to get into this a little bit. At the end of the day, your brand is your people and how your people treat those you serve. It's how they treat the kids or individuals served. It's how they treat their families. And here's the piece which is often overlooked. It's how your people treat each other. That is the brand. That's how we build this sense. So really, Phil, to answer what is a brand, it's your identity. And I think sometimes people confuse a brand with a logo. A logo is a symbol, but that is a symbol to an experience. So a brand really is an experience that a community is going to have. And why this is important, whether if it's for a school district or something else, you have levies to pass and other things to do that you're working on in the future. People will always ask us, how do we communicate something that's very important to the community? One of the things Phil, myself, Caitlin, and others here will always ask is, does the community trust you? Because if they don't trust you, you can have the glossiest flyer or the best website or whatever. It doesn't matter. Your brand is a vehicle for your identity and for your trust.
Thanks, Tom. And so, we often say that if we had to use one word to describe brand, it's just that, trust. So whether we're a school or a board of developmental disabilities or a city, village, or any other organization, what are some ways that we can build trust or create brand ultimately?
Right. Well, I want to kind of break that. I actually want to expand on that trust thing a little bit more, and the idea that I want you to envision who is the most untrustworthy human being you know of. Don't say it out loud, but who is the most untrustworthy human being? Put that picture in your mind.
Yeah, don't put it in the chat. No, don't.
If that person gave you, I have a great financial opportunity for you, it's glossy, it's nice, would you invest in this? No way. There's no way. I don't care how nice it, again, that trust. And let's think about our brand. Our brand, this is how people know us. So how do we build a brand? One of the things we need to do, and Phil, gosh, with your years of experience as a leader in schools, I'd love you to weigh in on this. We have to engage with the community. We have to understand what is important to them. And a way to do that is through focus groups. It's through surveys. It's through meaningful engagement. Here's the thing is we need to communicate to the population what we're doing, but we need to make sure we're doing it in a manner which makes sense to them. And there's a couple aspects to that. One, the more obvious one is the mediums we use, right? If we want to communicate our brand and we're putting everything, we're entirely doing everything on our website, or we're just doing a print newsletter or whatever else, are we really getting our brand out there? Do we know how people want to receive their information? So what are the actual mediums that we're using? So we need to ask people that. The second piece is, honestly, what is important to your community? We have to understand what do they find that your district or your entity provides that is of value. We do a lot of work. We had one years ago where there was a situation coming up, and the community came to us and they said, it's all, this message is all about the fire and police. This is a municipal thing. It's all about, let's talk about the fire and police. We said, well, you know what? Let's talk to the community, find out what's important to them. All the community wanted was a pool. I mean, honest to gosh, they wanted a pool. That's what they wanted. Focused a lot of the messaging on the pool and the recreation, and they were able to really connect with the population. They assumed what the community wanted to hear. Another point we had, years ago, we had a situation in which there was an entity, it was a very large park district, and they were trying to get people interested in the parks. And what they were saying is that it was kind of a rural area, and they wanted to lead with the fact that they're very dedicated to open space. We did the polling and such, and this is silly. We found out that people there could care less about open space. They were passionate about green space, but they didn't want open space. It's the same thing. Okay, here's the crazy part. Had they led with messaging, one of our strategic goals is open space, no one cares. Green space is important. Why is this important? Think about the many things you do. Think about the many services you offer, ways you connect and such. Is the language you're using actually connecting with the people we're trying to connect with? Are we talking about a program or curriculum or something? We're passionate about it. They don't even know about it or the language they're using. So, Phil, is a great question. How do you get your message out? We engage with people. We ask them, how do you want to get your message? How often do you want to get your message? And what about what we do is important to you? I don't know, Phil, if you have any kind of experiences or thoughts with some of the engagement. You guys did some amazing things at Hudson as far as engaging the population and understanding what they need.
Well, I think one of the most important points about that is that it has to be done in sincerity. So when we think about building trust and building brand and engaging the community or asking for survey results, when we ask, it must be done in sincerity. It can't be for the purpose of building our brand. Brand is built because of trust. Trust is built when you do what you say you're going to do. And so if we're conducting a survey, if we're conducting community engagement, we have to sincerely listen to the results. You gave some examples of organizations that did that. I think one of the biggest examples from my time in Hudson was when we were developing the master facility plan, and we had worked for multiple years to develop 3 different options of the plan. We went out and asked the community, what 3 options do you like the best? And the community came back in focus groups and surveys and basically told us, we don't like any of them, but we like parts of all of them. And so we were back to the drawing board. We had to really sincerely share what we heard. If you're going to value that input from those that you're asking, or I guess it's essential to value the input from those that you're asking by really hearing it and doing something with the information, and that builds trust. I mean, think of the Maya Angelou quote. The people will forget what you said, people forget what you did, but people will never forget the way you made them feel. They will see our communities are wise, our staff are wise. If it's not sincere, people will see right through that. They will feel it, and they will not forget it. And so it's important when we're engaging and asking for feedback, asking for input, that it's in a sincere way. Or even in our communication efforts, are we really just trying to put a spin on something, or are we sincerely trying to explain a set of circumstances, a set of priorities, what we're trying to accomplish? It needs to just be from the heart and honest about what we're trying to accomplish, and people will feel that as well, and then trust begins to be built upon that.
What we're trying to do here is convey that, again, I think the misunderstanding of branding is you pump out a new logo and everybody's happy. It's to do it well. It's a much more substantive, involved, thoughtful thing, right? And I'm going to hit upon trust again, because you build trust by doing what you say you're going to do. And are you, as a district or an entity, continually putting those things out? And also, we'll run into this a lot. We'll ask a district or the city, whatever, are you communicating? They'll say, absolutely. We send out a quarterly newsletter. Is anybody reading it? No. That's not communication. Communication is putting out information with the expectation somebody else receives it, understands it, and it's actionable. That's communication. It's a kind of a two-way street. So you need to ask yourself, or those we're working with, are we really communicating, or are we checking a box, putting out a couple tactics, right? So let's I'm going to kind of go back here a second too about the brand. So if we're building something that is sincere, and if I said a moment ago about your staff is your brand, this is an entire 3-hour discussion I'm going to talk about in the next 3 minutes. So this kind of opens up a discussion. Does your staff have clear expectations of how they treat those you serve, their families, and each other? Because if not, we can't be surprised when people just act any way they are, when people are rude, when people do whatever. If we want a culture that is positive and kind and supportive and the rest, we have to clearly define what that is, communicate that regularly, reinforce it, and reward it. So I can't possibly get into the details of it here, but it's just it's one of those things to ask. Does your staff, are there clearly defined rules of engagement? I mean, it's so funny. We're in schools all the time, and schools on the wall, there's a poster for the kids. Don't push, don't spit, don't fight. Okay, all the kids, it's very clear with these rules for the kids, right? For adults, we very rarely have rules. We assume that people know how to behave and how to treat each other. And honestly, that's a false assumption, because we're all brought up from different places and different situations, and where it might be common sense for person A to say please and thank you and treat someone well. Person B has been brought up in an environment where that was not a part of their environment, so common sense doesn't exist. So that's an entirely different thing that we would love to talk to anybody about. But just building that culture, that is such a fundamental piece of your brand, how your people treat each other. I mean, think about it. When somebody comes in and engages with one of your front desk staff and they have a miserable experience and they leave, that's what they think about your district or your entity or whatever. Or they come in and they have a lovely experience. Someone is kind, offers them a bottle of water. They walk away thinking, wow, what a great place. So staff development is a huge piece of your brand.
So Tom, we know that brand is trust. We know that our staff also are our brand. They represent our brand, and their actions and the way they make people feel every day is the way that a brand is built. What are other ways that we can engage with staff or build brand internally? Sometimes I've heard you talk about understanding the power of being liked. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, this is really it's funny. My son is chasing me across the room here. So it's just the idea that as a staff, as leaders, we need to make sure that our people, our staff members, feel valued. because people, they're doing a really good job. When we talk about brand and customer service, a lot of times we get it backwards. Like we put these programs in place so we can serve the people. This is especially true in the development and disability community, where they are so about serving others, and it's wonderful. Sometimes they're ripping each other to shreds, but boy, are they serving other people well. Internally, you have to fill your own glass first, and then it overflows by serving others. So how are we doing this? And Phil hit upon that, is how to make people feel as though they're engaged. There have to be systems in place. Do your leaders, are they actually interested in the staff? Are we going out of our way to know our staff members' names? There's a ton of people in some of these staffs, but are we going out of our way to the names? Are we going out of our way to know something about them? Are we aware as leaders of our physical presence, of our body language and tone are more important than the words we use? Is our staff aware of how we're interacting with each other? Are we going out of our way to set each other up for success? These are things that, again, we assume people, this is common sense. It's how we treat others. And the common sense, I'm going to say it for the third time, does not exist. If we want a culture, Phil, where people, they feel valued, they feel engaged, they feel as though that they matter, that has to be defined by leadership. Leadership has to model it. And when that really gets cooking, then is when the staff themselves begin to appreciate and be kind and lift each other up. It might begin as a top-down initiative, but the way it really flourishes is throughout the organization. Phil, you were fabulous with that at Hudson and others, and you're terrific at it here. What's your secret sometimes as far as just building that positive culture which drives the brand?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's the same thing that we were talking about on a greater capacity, doing things with sincerity. Again, if we're engaging with our staff members internally, how are we engaging with them? Do we take a sincere interest in their life? Do we take a sincere interest in their growth, in the direction that they want to go, in how they feel about their work? Do we take a sincere interest in others? Just like, do we take a sincere interest in how the community feels about us, and are we willing to make changes in response to what the community tells us? It's the same thing in a one-to-one basis. Do we take a sincere interest in others? A big part of that is just noticing what people do and saying thank you for the work that they do, or to catch someone doing something right. You always talk about that as well, Tom. Just noticing work that was well done, and let's acknowledge that and celebrate it. We spend some time here in the beginning of meetings, periodic meetings that we have, like with our account leads, saying, what are some examples of good work, and we share those. Many times that just turns into expressions of one of our team members acknowledging another team member and thanking them, but I'm sharing what is good work. And so I can't stress it enough in terms of the importance of taking a sincere interest in others, and how they feel, in order to build trust internally, and build that culture, as well as with external stakeholders at the same time.
So I wonder if you'd share. I love your starfish story. I know, but the idea that I sometimes will be dealing with large organizations, and there's a bit of anxiety or helplessness felt by some, like, look, the head folks here don't appreciate that. The others folks, what can I do? I mean, there are other people in the organization which will not embrace that philosophy. What difference could I possibly make? And I don't know if you want to share that story. I just love it.
Sure. It's kind of funny because I thought everyone knew this story, and I told it a few weeks ago, and Tom's like, "I've never heard that. That's fantastic." But imagine a man's walking down a beach. He comes across another individual, and there's and he's picking up starfish and he's throwing them in. There's all these starfish that have been washed up on the beach, and it's in the morning, and he's just picking them up and throwing them out, and the sun's going to come out soon and dry up the beach and dry up those starfish ultimately, and the gentleman walking down the beach asked the other man who's throwing them back, he's like, "Look at all these starfish." He goes, "Why are you doing that? You can't possibly make a difference." And he picks up one more and he throws it in and looks back at the other gentleman and says, made a difference to that one. And I think the point here is just what Tom is saying. So sometimes people feel like, look, I can't change the whole culture of our organization. But you can change the culture for that one person, and you can be the person for them that changes that culture. You can be someone that they trust. You can begin with just a single relationship, and that spreads. And ultimately, particularly in leadership positions, it has chances to spread exponentially. It really can change a culture, but it just is a matter of starting with one person. And so even if you don't change an entire culture or build trust or change an entire brand of an organization, you're still making meaningful difference in individuals' lives. You made a difference to that one, and that's also important.
So that's kind of the idea. And again, literally, we've got a 4-hour talk on how to build that culture, and the rest we can't get into that. But really want to hit the fact: your culture, to build good people that treat each other in the community well, is the fundamental basis of your brand. Then you take that brand. Now we then utilize that. We've communicated with the population. We've asked them, how do you want to get your information? What mechanisms do you want to receive it from? How often? All that good stuff. And then we find out what is of interest to them. And collectively, we communicate that. And here's the other aspect of the brand. It takes time. It takes time. You're not going to put out a quarterly newsletter with a new logo and like, oh my gosh, our brand is sparkling. It takes a long time, and you need to have people that they're consistently getting these positive messages from your entity again and again and again. And a big aspect of that as well is we're big proponents of strategic messaging. And what this is all about is that if you're saying everything to everyone about everything, it's too much. People are busy. What are the 2 to maybe 4 things that your school district or board of DD or city or whatever, the 2 that the community has got to understand, or that your staff has got to those are your communication priorities. You define what those are. And then based upon all of those different mediums, which you've determined are important, you deploy that message again and again and again in language that the population understands. People need to hear things, 11 to 15 times before it even sinks in. So let's say you've got an initiative, like this is so important. We talked about it at the board meeting. Why doesn't anybody know about it? It was on the newsletter. Why doesn't anybody know about it? Because they need to hear about it 14 more times. It's got to be on the website, and there's got to be an email blast, and it's got to be the main topic at the PTA meetings, and it's got to be at the Rotary discussion. The 15th time somebody comes across it, they're going to say, hey, were you aware that they were doing this? And you're thinking, holy smokes, we've been talking about it. So a brand is message and repetition of that message to ensure your population finally gets it.
So I want to watch the time here, and I want to make sure we're leaving a few minutes for questions. But before we switch over, just briefly, Tom, sometimes brands take a hit. And something happens in an organization where people thought they had trust in an organization, but there's an unfortunate set of circumstances, and then they think they lose some of that trust, or they at least question. How do you protect your brand?
Well, again, I appreciate that. This is literally another 4-hour discussion, so I'll do it in 4 minutes here. The idea is that your brand, the best thing you can do to protect your brand is to have a strong brand. What I mean by that is you are going to take hits. The world is moving too fast. Social media is too vibrant. You're dealing with too many people. Bad things are going to happen. The question is, if you have enough deposited in your positive reputation bank account, think about that. When something happens, you got some cushion, because people are like, well, bad things happen, but that's a really good organization based upon, if people have no idea about your brand, or your brand's a little bit negative, when you take that hit, because you're gonna take the hit, there's no reserve. You're immediately in a bad place. So the most fundamental thing you can do to protect your brand, first of all, is to have a great brand. The second aspect is, again, can't get into this today, but you need to have a crisis communication strategy. You need to understand, you need to have people trained to handle crisis communication. You need to be ready to deploy rapidly. You need to be ready to protect your brand, because a brand is a fragile thing. Even if you have a great brand, I mean, think of gosh, think of BP, think of Penn State, think of other these really strong brands. When a bad things happen, if that communication is not handled properly, that brand goes south. And let's face it, guys, it's challenging. We have staff members making very sometimes unethical, bad decisions. Things happen. People get hurt. When that happens, how do you not allow that event to become what people think? When we think of Penn State, anytime Phil and I or our team show a Nittany Lion, a picture of Penn State, and we ask an audience, what does this mean for you? They say Jerry Sandusky's sex scandal. That brand has become an immediate link to that awful event. We need to be aware that we put all this energy into the brand. So again, can't get into it now. The thing to ask is, do you have a strategy in place to immediately, in a communication sense, handle things that happen so you can protect your brand? So answer the first question: have a great brand to have some cushion, and then have a crisis communication plan and methodology in place should something happen. And we would argue it's not a matter of if, but it's a matter of when.
Thanks, Tom. Tracy and Karen, any others on here? Do you have any questions you'd like us to answer? You can either type them in the chat or just unmute and just ask us the questions. Is there anything you'd like to ask us about brand or anything that we shared today before we wrap up?
I do have a couple questions. This has been a really good conversation. I've taken 2 pages of notes, but I do want to know, do you have any suggestions for rebranding a website? The format, the layout, communication, what's important, what's not important. I think sometimes websites could be helpful and sometimes they cannot be helpful, just depending on the layout, the formatting, and the structure. So do you have any suggestions on some good examples of formatting and communication through your website or school's website?
Yeah, then we could probably send some website type examples your way for sure. On a kind of a high level, again, this is how we engage with the community. What's important to them? What do we highlight in the website? Certainly a lot of video is important. Your images. When you say rebrand, you're talking about like new logos and things for your district, or just a new look for your website itself?
New look for the website itself. Right now, our website is transitioning under construction. So we've kind of changed the look of it, but just looking at the tabs, the communication, what's in there, is it user friendly? How are things communicated? Just all of the above when you talk about a school website.
Well, what you want to ask yourself too, and Phil, please weigh in here. But if somebody is landing there, is it easy to use? Can they find what they need in 2 clicks? And is it communicating your message? In that people they spend just a couple seconds on these sites, these different pages, right? So if somebody's on the page, what is the main message of your entity? What are you trying to get across? Is it crystal clear when someone lands there and engages of the information you're trying to get across? Phil, I don't know if you have any thoughts or suggestions here.
Yeah, I mean, one of the basics today is making sure that even in terms of an adaptive website. So websites today have gotten so much better in terms of the platforms being adaptive to from the computer to an iPad to a phone. But are we looking at that user experience through all of those lenses? And so as we talk about simplicity, or we talk about videos or imagery, which we would encourage good photos and or good videos on the website, and relatively simple navigation. So we have to decide what are those primary channels within a website. How can it be organized then to be able to go deeper? But we have to think about that user experience from all of those different platforms, because so many people today are accessing websites simply via their phone. And so that's sometimes a user experience that's overlooked.
And you got to think too, think of your website as like the center of a bicycle wheel with all the spokes. The website is, your social media, is driving people to the website. Your public speaking is driving people to the website. These different things you're doing, all these different ads are driving there. So when people are driven there, what do you want them to do? What experience do you want them to have? If we define that, and again, we didn't even get into the whole messaging aspect, but what is the message of your entity? When someone engages with your brand, what do you want them to immediately take away? Is that foremost on that site? Do people, if they're only on that site for 10 seconds, have you conveyed the emotional message regarding the value of your organization to them?
Yeah, and Tracy, I think we can share some examples of websites that we think are well done with you as well. I think we have your email because you got here, right? So
we do. And Tom and Phil, if I may, Tracy, I'm Caitlin. I'm an account lead here at the Impact Group. I've worked with a couple different districts in rebranding their website, and just as far as navigation goes, something that is a helpful and sometimes tedious first step, but it really helps the navigation process come to fruition, just kind of mapping out what that looks like, building out a really structured web of where all those pages are going to go and what those buckets will look like is a very helpful first step.
Thank you, Caitlin. Yep. Any other questions before we wrap up? I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Any other questions?
Hi, Tom and Phil. This is Karen Arbogast from Revere. I just wanted to say thank you. I could listen to the two of you all day. I felt like you were talking to me personally when we're talking about the idea of a brand. We're working on a brand guide for the Minuteman and representing that brand and all of our activities and athletics. But that's a logo. That's a picture, I suppose. And what you talked about today was so much more than that with branding and that trust and representing who you are and how we're treating people and interacting with people. So that was really, really powerful message. Thank you for lifting that up and reminding us of how important that is.
Of course.
Thank you, Karen. And really, you're exactly right. What we're talking about today is what feelings do we want to be able to generate when people look at that logo, right? So the logo, of course, we want the design to be great, but at the same time, we want that to evoke emotions. And those emotions are built upon all the things that we talked about today.
It's fascinating. We're wrapping up here, but those organizations that have a really powerful brand where you that logo and you have this feeling of just, oh my gosh, what an awesome thing. That is not an accident. That is very intentional, thoughtful, repetitive, purposeful building and maintaining of that brand. So if you want to have a strong brand, that's what we got to do. And Tracy is an absolute shameless plug. We would be thrilled to help you if you have any needs with that website. That's one of the things we do, and that would be wonderful.
All right. With that, we'll wrap things up. Thank you again for being on here and joining us for this time. We're going to continue to do more of these webinars, and based on some of the feedback today, it might be a little more conversational like this, and just engage our participants with us and talk about some of the things that we love to talk about, which are the communications and how we recognize priorities and how we help organizations achieve what's most important to them. So again, thank you so much, Tom. Thank you for sharing all of your knowledge with us today, and have a great day. And as we like to say, make someone else's day great today.